He grew up sharing one bedroom with his parents and three siblings, on an island most of the football world couldn't find on a map. At 15, doctors found a problem in his heart that could have ended his career before it started. Today, his name is one of the two most argued about words in football. But before the trophies, before the money, before the abs and the airports named after him, there was just a poor kid from Madeira with something to prove. This is the story most highlight reels skip. This is part 1. Cristiano Ronaldo dos Santos Aveiro was born on February 5, 1985, in Funchal, the capital of Madeira, a small Portuguese island in the Atlantic, hundreds of kilometers from mainland Europe. He was the youngest of 4 children. His mother worked as a cook and cleaner. His father worked as a kit man for a local amateur football club and struggled for years with alcoholism that would eventually take his life. By his own account, and his mother's, the family had almost nothing. He shared a bedroom with his parents and siblings. Some years, there were no Christmas presents at all. Football wasn't a hobby in that house. It was close to the only thing that was actually free. He was playing for Andorrinha, the amateur club where his father worked, before he'd even turned 10, already the best player on the pitch, every single time. After 2 years at Andorrinha, a young Ronaldo moved to Nacional, one of Madeira's bigger clubs. He was so far ahead of players his own age that clubs on mainland Portugal started to take notice. A genuine rarity for a boy from the islands, which the mainland football world largely overlooked. In 1997, at just 12 years old, he was invited to a 3-day trial with Sporting Clube de Portugal, one of the country's biggest clubs. He didn't just pass the trial. By most accounts, he embarrassed it. Sporting signed him for a fee of around £1,500, a number that looks almost like a rounding error next to what he'd eventually be worth. There was just one catch. To take the opportunity, a 12-year-old boy would have to leave Madeira behind completely and move to Sporting's academy in Alcaquete, near Lisbon. Alone, he said yes. And it broke something in him for a while. Ronaldo has talked openly, later in life, about how hard that move actually was. Homesick, hundreds of miles from his mother, surrounded by teammates from the mainland who mocked his thick Madeiran accent. He cried, by his own admission, more nights than he'd like to count. At one point, he seriously considered going home. It was his mother who talked him out of it over the phone. He stayed, and he channeled all of it, the homesickness, the mockery, the isolation, into training harder than almost anyone else at the academy. He was also, by his own admission, difficult, fiercely competitive, quick to anger, convinced of his own ability in a way that occasionally got him in trouble. At 14, he was expelled from school for a year after throwing a chair at a teacher he felt had disrespected him. Around that same time, he made a deal with his mother. He'd leave formal education behind entirely and pour everything into football instead. It's a version of Ronaldo that doesn't often make the highlight reels, a lonely, angry, homesick teenager, betting his entire future on a sport that hadn't promised him anything yet. Then, at 15, came the moment that could have ended all of it before it really began. Doctors diagnosed Ronaldo with tachycardia, a condition causing his resting heart rate to race abnormally fast, even when he wasn't moving. For an academy prospect whose entire future depended on elite physical performance, it was a potential death sentence for his career. There was even a real possibility he'd have to give up football entirely. He underwent heart surgery. Doctors used a laser procedure to cauterize the source of the irregular rhythm. The operation happened in the morning. By his mother's account, he was out by the end of the same afternoon. He was back in training within days. There's something in that detail worth sitting with. A 15-year-old, told his heart itself might end his career, choosing to get back on the pitch as fast as physically possible rather than resting on doctor's orders. It's arguably the first real glimpse of the obsessive, almost inhuman work ethic that would go on to define his entire career. By 2002, at just 17, Ronaldo made his senior debut for Sporting. Word started spreading around Portuguese football that the academy had produced something special. Then, in August 2003, everything accelerated. Sporting hosted a preseason friendly to open their brand-new stadium. The opponent, Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs on the planet, managed by Sir Alex Ferguson. Ronaldo, 18 years old, tore United's experienced defense apart for 90 minutes. By full-time, several United players had reportedly gone straight to Ferguson and told him, in no uncertain terms, to sign this kid immediately. Ferguson didn't need convincing twice. Manchester United agreed a fee of roughly £12.24 million, a British record at the time for a teenager. The boy who'd been mocked for his island accent just a few years earlier was about to become the most expensive teenage footballer in English football history. In the summer of 2003, an 18-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo left Portugal for Manchester, carrying a number 7 shirt that had previously belonged to legends like George Best and David Beckham. An almost impossible weight of expectation for a teenager who, just 6 years earlier, had been a homesick 12-year-old crying himself to sleep in a Lisbon dormitory. Nobody in that stadium yet knew they were about to watch the start of one half of the greatest individual rivalry the sport has ever produced. How a raw, occasionally reckless teenage winger turned himself into the most complete goal-scoring machine football has ever seen. That's part 2. If you want to see how this story really takes off, subscribe. Part 2 is coming next.